This is egg and crab, and it really is egg and crab. I thought it was egg, like a fried egg poured over a pile of rice, but no, because I've seen that also, but I haven't had it yet. Following Lonely Planet's directions on Yamamoto and out of the station, we are now at, and I'll stop, the Yanaka cemetery map. So we'll take a closer look at it. To the right of where I'm standing is this children's park here and this portion of the cemetery. Over here, the Tokugawa family graveyard in Tennoji Temple and the Tokugawa family graveyard. Remember that these people had absolute control for a little bit over 250 years. This also orientates you to the Nippori Station, South Gate. Now my purpose today is simply to cruise Yanaka area and not be overly committed to doing anything in particular other than what I run across and can find in my leisurely meandering through my itinerary. Characterizes the Japanese cemetery so far are these multiple sized obelisks that make up each grave site. In itself, perhaps an individual shrine to the family, usually a place for flowers. Here, an anomaly, but not a terribly great anomaly, and that is this large stone as a prime grave marker element. Here, the people that are buried could believe at a certain point after 50, 100 years that their passage through time and the Tokugawa experience would be remembered by ancestors, by progeny, in the future. And they were right to the extent of another 150 to 200 years. This is just that little section, I think, that we saw to the right in the big map. This is interesting, a whole pile of these slats that we've seen characterizing grave sites and have no idea what they mean, but just lying here ignominiously. Have they just been replaced? It's interesting how some of these sites are certainly very old. 3-4 sites down, you can tell from the aged stone that that's the case. And portions of some of these, like the one in front of the camera now, suggest antiquity, but relatively new prime stone in the center, that gray, relatively new, maybe the last 50, 80 years, something like that. Simple, relatively speaking, to the rest of these. Did these families pick out the stone after a death, or did the patriarch of the family choose the stone initially, even before his own death? Some of these you can see having a wall around them, or the form of a wall. Here an older version of same. Is it possible that many of these original Tokugawa families, which the Tokugawa's rule ended in 1570 or so, 1850 to 1853 to 1870, somewhere in that realm, I forget the exact date of the abdication. Is it possible that many of these families continue? That would account for modern, new-looking obelisks in the center, surrounded by the much, much older platform and wall. This one, curiously, with pretty good display of, I'm thinking, dried flowers, seems to be in total old. What's interesting is that almost sutra look in building. What is the significance of that old pedestal rock that doesn't even look interesting in itself? Notice how this site, a quite old one it looks like, has a step up, and then the incense burner, pretty significant looking one, and there for flowers, one of those uninteresting stones, but must have some great significance as a pedestal for the other. And this Kori, or Tori rather, T-O-R-I-I, I believe it's spelled, magnifying the idea of a shrine. It's interesting how there are also little unique elements of different grave sites, as though that somehow could elevate these people even among their peers who lay around them. Look at this larger enclosed area that would normally house several individual grave sites. Is fenced out, if you will, or fenced off, and has at least 5 grave sites, if not 6. Was it a family? A large family? Here a clear statement of Buddha and Buddhism commitment of the family or the person. This is somewhat interesting looking stone in its own right. It is interesting because no site comes even remotely close to demonstrating the continued attention for ancestors, or at least this site, as does this one with this incredible profusion of flowers. We'll leave this cemetery portion and go on. Dogs, you don't see that many dogs, and they in the main are very well controlled. We're back at the "You Are Here" point, and notice that just behind me and to my left is the Tennoji Temple and the Ryun Temple, however you say that, even further to my left. So presumably we go inside here and somehow get access to this. Assuming this quite modern entrance is into Tennoji. Pretty faucet on this purification tub, for lack of a better name. Was made, this copper Buddha, sitting Buddha, was made in 1690 by Ota Keyumon, a name I think I read about in Before the Dawn, who lived in Kanda. This is called a charnel house. I assume from the choice of words that's where bodies were cremated. Again, incredible simplicity. Significance of these this string of copper cups. At first I thought they might be bells, but of course they wouldn't work like bells in that position. They have nothing in them. It appears to be a stone in each one of them, a small pebble, but that may just be what keeps it attached to the next. And it's not attached at the bottom, although it looks like it might have at one time been so. More precise form of tile roofing than I saw in China. And of course extremely understated, which has a very modern element on the left, so I don't know how old it is. Again, it has a solid and a comfortable feel about it aesthetically. The aged, unvarnished wood, particularly the light gray wood of the banister contrasted against that darker wood of the sliding panels. With very simple square endings to those rafters, painted white as a standard design element of all temples apparently that I've seen. Half of it, or a portion of it, dead on the right, it looks like, but containing these pretty little flowers. We'll see how close we can get before we lose definition. Very pretty plant set in a pot beside the slider door. Again, artistically, aesthetically, very simple. In a temple was quite analogous, actually, and strangely so, with the quiet on the subway yesterday, even though it was a reasonably busy time of the morning. And yet, when the train would stop, inside the train, dead silence. Little bud flowers. I assume that they're just buds. They'll perhaps blossom out at some point. But even this, again, that super restraint, that aesthetic simplicity. The bush itself reflects it. Unless it's the entrance to one of the other temple, and these two are just combined, and I'm not seeing that, along with their devices for pouring water, ladles. I mean, that's the extent of the design, really. And then these finials, which always remind me of women's breasts. You see them all over the world, but here, quite simply done. And stayed at the house of Seki Nagutero, the lord of this area. He carved a sculpture of himself, and Nagutero built a hermitage in which he enshrined the sculpture. This was the original Tennoji Temple, which is generally said to have been established in the Muromachi period between 1394 and 1427. Among the temples still extant in Tokyo, there are a few which were founded before the Edo period of 1600 to 1868. So Tennoji is one of the few ancient temples left in Tokyo. So along with the Ryosenji Temple, Meguro, and Yushima Tenjin Shrine in Ueno, it was famous as one of the 3 lotteries. Vehicle may be the extent of it. That van down there, and then it ranges all around to our right. Thick the base is, almost looks like a side tree that's quite large in its own right. In a large conflagration of the area. Then it was rebuilt again and donated to the city of Tokyo, I believe, in 1908. And it was then in 1957, it was destroyed by arson fire. And this may be the act of arson by a couple who then, a young couple who then committed suicide. Exactly what the point of such destruction could be, I don't know. Maybe they were zealots against the religion it stood for at the time.